Most people go no contact for reasons that sound good on paper, but underneath that, there's a lot more going on that we need to understand, especially as spiritual people. You get broken up with, or somebody crosses a line, and your first instinct may be to cut this person off completely. That's it. I'm done. No more. And in that moment, it feels empowering. It feels like you've reclaimed your dignity. It feels like you have control again. And you tell yourself you're doing it because you've moved on, or because you're showing them that you're unbothered by their behavior. Sometimes we cut people off to prove a point. Other times it's to stop them from having access to you. Either way, it looks like it's the right thing to do on the surface. But if you've ever tried to go no contact from that more emotional place, you already know that it's a lot harder than it actually seems, because you're not really done. You're just being quiet. Yet you're still checking that person's stories. You're still scrolling through their page. You're seeing who likes their posts. Maybe you're asking mutual friends if they've heard anything about the person. You're going back and rereading old messages, and you're still trying to make sense of everything that happened. That is not proper no contact, at least not from the spiritual perspective. That is still being invested in the relationship, just without talking to the other person. And that version of no contact usually hurts you more than it helps you, because it's all about the withdrawal and you don't have any of the internal clarity. And we're going to get into why that happens and what to do about it, because there's actually a better way to approach no contact that doesn't feel like punishment for them. It doesn't feel like manipulation, and it doesn't feel like you're constantly wrestling with yourself or with your emotions just to not reach out. But before we get into the details of the spiritual approach to no contact, if you're new here, my name is Watkins. I've been in the mindfulness and meditation space for 20 plus years, and I created this channel for people like you who identify as spiritual, but you still find yourself struggling to deal with everyday real life situations, things like breakups, friendships, boundaries, work drama, and all the gray areas in between. And my goal with this channel is to help you get more context for these experiences from the 30,000 foot view, for what I call the spiritual perspective, so that you can navigate them with more peace and understanding and with more power. All right, so let's talk about no contact and when to actually apply it so that it works for you instead of against you. Because what most people do is they just jump right into no contact way too soon while they're still processing everything that happened. It's a knee-jerk reaction. You hurt me. You don't get to talk to me that way. And I get it. I've been there. In the moment, it makes total sense. It's clean, it's decisive, and it's hurtful to the other person. But when you're still in that raw emotional state, it's kind of like trying to heal a wound while you're still bleeding, while you're obsessing over all of the what ifs. What if I had said something different? What if they misunderstood my actions? What if all of this is just a big miscommunication? And now, instead of feeling free, you actually feel stuck. Not because you're not talking to them, but because you can't stop talking to yourself about them. And this is why so many people struggle with no contact. It's not that the idea itself is flawed. It's that most people go no contact before they're ready. They go quiet externally, but they're still deeply entangled internally. So, what's the alternative? Well, from the spiritual perspective, the first thing we want to do when the relationship is ending or when the disrespect happens is not to disappear, okay? It's to gather more information. I'm not saying you go beg somebody for closure. You're not manipulating anyone. You're not stalking anyone. You just genuinely want to understand what happened and where things currently stand. And if it's a friend, if it's a coworker or family member, that might look like initiating a calm and grounded conversation, where you ask real questions instead of making assumptions and declarations. And through having a dialogue, you might realize that you were both reacting to different interpretations of the same event. And if you can get even a small piece of clarity from that, it may help you move forward with peace or continue on in that relationship or dynamic. And when it comes to romantic relationships, gathering information can look like giving things just a little bit more space, but not necessarily slamming the door. Sometimes you need to have another conversation. And this is going to sound controversial, but sometimes gathering more information may mean going back for another round. Not because you're trying to rekindle the original fantasy, but because you just want to see the truth more clearly. And that's where it gets tricky because we've been conditioned to believe that we should never give somebody a second chance or a third chance or a fourth chance, right? Because going back means what? You're weak. It means you're being gullible. It means that person's not really sorry. They just got caught. But from a spiritual perspective, that's actually not weakness if you're doing it with the awareness of gathering more information. Because sometimes the only way to know if something is truly, truly done is to see what happens when you revisit the situation, right? Maybe the breakup was impulsive. Maybe somebody panicked. Maybe there was some immaturity on one side or on both sides. I've been there before. And if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. I've been in that moment when you pull the eject cord way too soon, thinking the grass is going to be greener on the other side, only to realize shortly after that it's absolutely not. And sometimes that second round will bring things back on track and you'll be able to be in the relationship a little bit longer. But often what happens is it reveals what's always been there, which is the imbalance. And this is a good thing because you start to see, oh, this is a one-sided effort. You're investing way more than they are. Or they're investing way more than you are. Somebody's been pouring more in while the other person's been coasting. And when you start to see that more clearly, something inside of you is going to click and you're going to stop asking yourself, what if I had just said this? Or what if I had just tried that? Because you already did. You said the things, you tried the things, you went back for more. You showed up in all the ways you could, and it still wasn't enough to change the dynamic. That's when the grip starts to loosen. And you stop hoping that that other person suddenly wakes up and appreciates your value. You stop needing closure from them. You stop addictively checking their social media. You stop wondering if they feel bad about what happened. And that is the turning point. That is the ripe time to go no contact, because now no contact doesn't feel like a punishment or a strategy or manipulation. It feels like a natural exit or graduation from the dynamic. You're not doing it to get a reaction. You're doing it because you've seen what you needed to see. You've gathered the information and you've come to the conclusion that that experience is now complete. You've officially graduated. You're done with that lesson. And you can appreciate what that lesson taught you and even be grateful for the experience because you don't have any desire to go back. Do you have a book you've been trying to finish, or weight you've been trying to lose, or a podcast you've been wanting to start, but you're all up in your head about it, or you keep stopping and starting, or you're drowning in your important sounding excuses? If so, I've got something that could help you bring your project to completion finally. It's called the Finish Line Program, and it's uniquely designed to give you all the elements for getting your dream across the finish line within 12 weeks, so you can become the type of person who actually finishes what you started. You'll get an in-depth planning session with me where we'll outline all of your weekly and daily milestones. Then I'll support you along the way. And most importantly, I'll be holding you accountable. The reason we keep stopping and starting is because we've been relying too heavily on self-accountability, which is actually the worst kind of accountability, because if self-accountability worked, you would have done it by now. So if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired of your excuses, apply to join the Finish Line Coaching Program now, and let's bring your project to completion within 12 weeks, no excuses. Space is limited. Go to thefinishlinecoaching.com to apply or use this QR code. If you try to graduate too early, though, before you learn the proper lesson, then you're just going to end up missing the experience. And you're going to find yourself thinking about the person, obsessing about them, and longing for closure from something that's already over. And every holiday, every birthday, every natural disaster, you're wondering if you should check in with that person or send them a message. That's what happens when you go no contact too soon. So if you catch yourself in this sort of emotional tug of war, half wanting to reach out, half wanting to stay strong, that's your cue that you might not be done gathering information, and that's okay. Going back does not mean that you have failed or that you're weak. It just means that a part of you is still learning the lesson. Sometimes you need to go back once or twice just to prove to yourself that it's still the same story, it's still the same dynamic, and once you've seen it play out a few more times, then you finally stop romanticizing the potential and you start accepting the reality of the situation. And that's when no contact actually becomes quite effortless. You don't have to try to not text the person. You just don't have any desire to. You're not tempted to look at their social media. You're not asking mutual friends what's going on with them. You're not waiting for closure. because you're just done. You're not bitter. You're not resentful. You're just done. And that version of no contact is actually an extension of the peace that you have inside because you're no longer suppressing anything. You're not pretending that it's over, even though it's not really over. And that is the goal of spiritual perspective. You've officially graduated. It's just like when you graduate from high school. You walk across the stage, you get your diploma. You are grateful for your teachers and for the lessons and everyone who pushed you. And you're no longer interested in going back in that classroom. You're now moving on to the next phase of your life. And like that, when you've gone back and you've gathered enough information and you graduate yourself from that experience, you're no longer wondering and obsessing over going back into that classroom that is a relationship. You can appreciate the person and all the lessons you learn with them, but now you're just moving on to the next phase of life. So that's the real goal of no contact from a spiritual perspective. Curious, what's been your experience with no contact? Have you ever done it too soon where you found yourself checking in and checking their social media after you swore that you were done? And what helped you finally move on for good? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this episode helpful, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more episodes. And share this with somebody who may be struggling with no contact so that they can benefit from hearing this perspective as well. I've got hundreds of other spiritual perspective videos that take the same 30,000 foot view on everything from relationships to boundaries to family dynamics to everyday challenges. You can start with this episode on whether or not you should get back with your ex. And I have another spiritual perspective here that you may like, which is all about cheating. And I'll see you in the next episode.